Welcome and thank you everyone for joining another one of the iSH podcast series where we place the spotlight on the amazing capability that we have in Cumbria. Today we have an important guest, which is RAICo, and Kirsty Hewitson, the director of RAICo, is here to tell us all about it. RAICo is a collaboration around robotics and AI, and they are the iSH Cumbria Robotics Cluster anchor organization, so really important to us. So welcome, Kirsty. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So explain to us, what is RAICo exactly?
So RAICo is a five-way collaboration. It stands for Robotics and AI Collaboration, so I guess the clue's in the title. And it involves 5 member organisations. There's the UK Atomic Energy Authority, which is essentially my home base, and you can think of us as the National Lab for Fusion. Then we have the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. We have Sellafield Limited, which is one of the largest site out of the NDA estate. We have the University of Manchester, and then we have AWE Nuclear Security Technologies.
Excellent. Okay. And what is the purpose of RAICo?
So when you think about those 5 different organisations, and in particular 4 of them, not really think about the University of Manchester, what we all have in common is that we have sites which need nuclear decommissioning. And so when you think about it from a taxpayer's perspective, it's if we've got these shared sites, we've probably got shared challenges, we've got stuff that we have in common. So the idea was that we come together, we identified those shared challenges, and then we pool our funding, pool our resourcing to work on those challenges from a common framework. And therefore, rather than duplicating things, we share them between us and ensure that we don't create things over and over and over again. Yeah, so we share knowledge and intelligence. Yeah.
And why robotics in nuclear decommissioning specifically?
So I guess when you think about levers or mechanisms by which you can accelerate the pace of nuclear decommissioning, robotics is one of those technologies which can actually potentially shift the needle and make a difference. So one, in terms of it's a technology which is both established and emerging. So you can think about some of the technologies around spot. We're seeing it's not BAU yet, business as usual, but it's becoming a more and more common feature. And if you fast forward 5, 10, however many years it is, maybe we'll have humanoids on our sites. So it's an area at the moment which is really experiencing massive growth. And I guess overall, though, it's that remit around, if you think about the NDA's mission, delivering it safer, faster, and more cost effectively, the safer bit is really where the emphasis is probably placed. So again, rather than allowing humans to enter some of these hazardous areas, instead send in the robots and hope they take on some of the risk, and again, just remove people from those active environments.
Makes sense. And you've mentioned Spot there. Spot is, of course, the quadruped. It's basically a robotic dog, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the quadruped that there are others available on the market, but it's probably the quadruped that most people are used to seeing. It's the one painted yellow. People will have seen it probably down at Whitehaven on the harbour. We've taken it out to various schools, as other people have. So, a lot of people use it, Createc, Atkins, Realis, a lot of our supply chain. It's a quadruped which has been passed to be able to use on nuclear licensed sites at the moment. So it's the one that we more commonly use. And it's one of those things where you see a robot and you see Spot, and people generally have, one of 2 reactions. They either think, oh, wow, look at that, and almost go to pet it like it's a dog, or they're a little bit freaked out by it. I don't know. I mean, this is a relatively new area for you to have got into, Miranda. What are your thoughts about when you see a robot like Spot? Do you see it as a tool, or do you see it as a bit of a gimmick and something that can add value, or something where you think, oh, I'm not sure about that?
I probably have been in the sort of nuclear industry and in this robotics field for long enough to have seen enough of what Spot does to understand the value of what it brings, that that it can enter into hazardous areas that we don't want humans to go into, and that it can be loaded up with all different sort of sensors and smart technology, I guess, that can identify radioactivity or identify and characterize what there is around that facility. So I understand the purpose of it and what it's there to do. But I have seen other people where I've taken them around like the Sellafield Engineering Centre of Excellence, and they've seen Spot and they've sort of done exactly what you said and gone to pet it. And people who are not from, you know, the nuclear industry or from that robotics field, they do kind of react funny. I've also, like you said, seen them down at Whitehaven Harbour, and I've taken my own son and his friends to go and see what they're like. And, you know, they get very excited when they, you know, kids do, don't they?
Yeah.
They just get very excited when they see robotic dogs like that. And I guess it does have almost like a personality when it starts to kind of move in the way that it does as well. So it's quite fun, but it can be a little bit intimidating as well, perhaps.
So do you think, because we'll probably get on to talking about outreach and skills as well later, but do you see that generational difference then? Because you mentioned your son, and certainly what we've seen is that when you take Spot or any robot into that classroom type environment, the kids don't really see that fear.
Yeah.
They see it as kind of, wow, look at this toy. I mean, we talk about it as a tool, but they see it as a toy and they go, wow, I could do that as a day job, work with something like that. Do you see that difference then? You mentioned your son. They generally just get really quite excited, the younger generation, and they embrace that. It's not just robotics, it's all technology and innovation, isn't it? They think about the upside rather than thinking, you know, is this a threat to my job? What's going to happen if it goes wrong?
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly what I was going to say, that they're so much more used to technology than we were when we were growing up as kids. So for them, it's kind of almost normal to be surrounded by technology and see things like robotic dogs in a way that, for our generation, less so. So it's something we've had to kind of almost get used to and over time, I guess.
Yeah, and I think this is what we'll see as, you know, any industry develops, not just nuclear, is that we embrace technology more and more. And I'll come back to my earlier comment that, you know, a robot is a tool. It's just another tool in your toolkit, and it's there to enable you to do your job more safely, more quickly, more efficiently. And it doesn't mean that a robot should necessarily take somebody's job. It should make that person's job easier and allow them to free them up to do things which are perhaps more cognitively more difficult that the robots can't do at the moment. But I completely understand that. I work with robots day in, day out. We talk about robots, we talk about technology, and that's very different to if you've not seen one before, or it's your job where you've got to accept that technology. Because I find, even though I work in the area of innovation and tech, sometimes, you know, you get a new bit of kit and you just go, oh my God, like I've got to get to grips with this. How am I going to use it? What am I going to do with it?
Absolutely.
So we all have these different barriers to adoption, whether of technology or just changes in our jobs and our roles.
Yeah, I can be a total Luddite at times with the most basic upgrades of like Microsoft Outlook.
I'm pretty sure you're not. But as you have that first instinct reaction is like, oh my God, can I do this? And you're like, just press the button.
Press the button.
Or there'll be an app for it somewhere. I'll just download the app and then everything will start working.
Absolutely.
And it'll be fine. Yeah.
So what other technology do you use other than robots? What are your tools in the toolbox?
So I guess it is mostly robots, but it's different types of robots. So we talked about Spot, which is the quadruped. And for there, it's, again, to be clear, mostly within RAICo, we don't develop hardware. So ours is about buying hardware from suppliers, so we refer to it as COTS, commercial off the shelf. So how do you take hardware and then integrate that hardware from different supply chain providers in order to give you that overall solution? So again, if we take something like Spot we purchase through Createch, who's a local company based in Cockermouth, but then we'll develop tools for the gripper, for the arm that you have essentially on Spot, in order to enable it to do the types of jobs that we want it to do. So the one you'll have probably seen most recently is the Spot swabbing tool, which can be used to support health physics in terms of taking swabs. So that was recognising that end user need, and then developing a tool which would then enable you to be able to do it. There's other scenarios, for example, glove boxes, where if you think about a glove box, it's a for those people who aren't familiar with them, it's a small contained area where you can do work inside normally by putting your hands into a glove box.
Right.
And instead it's how can you remove those hands from the glove box, because they can be quite dangerous environments if you've got sharps, for example, on the inside. Atkins Realis, who again we work with locally quite a lot, they have Robo, now called Argo, I think it is, where you put an actual robotic arm through the sleeve essentially of the glove box. Yeah. And what our approach, though, has been to actually ceiling mount 2 robotic arms, so they're permanently within the glove box. So they're kind of means to the same ends, but the approach that Atkins has taken can be used with existing glove boxes. And the approach that we're proposing is when you're going to buy a new glove box, think about how you build robotics into that glove box rather than
so you're using then your person's using a joystick or something to manipulate the arms to do the thing that they need to do.
Yeah, be a joystick, or it can be a haption controller, or you might have pre-programmed moves. So the materials research facility at UKAA's main site down at Culham in Oxfordshire, there they do particular types of material preparation, which is the same process over and over again. So if you can pre-program that into a robot, you can have the robot doing it 24/7 rather than during, your normal standard 8 hours operating, and that frees your operator off to do other types of work in terms of, interrogating that material, looking at it through microscopy, etc., rather than actually doing the day-to-day preparation of it. So I think when we think about robotic systems as we move forward, a lot at the moment has been around how do you take a system like a glove box and add in the robots. But actually where we want to really get to is if you're designing a new system, and a system could be a small glove box, or it could be an entire facility, an entire building, how do you build robots in from the start? So it's not a nice add-on, it's actually let's build them in concert with one another. So then we start to get that robotic integration from the start. And we get into the point where, more and more robotics kit is available in terms of hardware. And again, at RAICo, we don't produce hardware. That's what we engage with the supply chain with. And our role is, some R&D, but a lot of it's around the integration of the different pieces and how do you actually fit it all together. RAICo came about in terms of that urgent need to make sure we don't replicate things. But as with anything, actually the hardest part of a collaboration isn't really the tech, it's the people.
Of course.
It's around the stakeholders. And you've probably got some of your own experience, not just from your, we could talk about women in nuclear in terms of how you actually corral and pull those people together, but also now in your current role as iSH, it's the people which really makes things happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The stakeholders and the different people behind what you're trying to achieve. And, I think it's great that we're seeing so much more collaboration. I've already interviewed a number of companies in this region in West Cumbria who have recognized the value of the whole being more than the sum of the parts and coming together as SMEs, bidding for more work and bigger projects than they would on their own, starting to see that willingness to collaborate. And I think customers are looking for that as well, more and more, because it helps take away some of their risk as well, to see kind of consolidation of the industry and having the different capabilities within the project that they're looking for in the scope of work coming together of their own accord rather than a forced marriage, as it were. So so it's really good to see that openness and that willingness to collaborate. But like you say, it is difficult. So what is it like with this particular collaboration?
So if you look at our program, it's a portfolio of different projects. And essentially we engage with end users to find these challenges from end users. So they've got to be end user driven. So it's got to be
the
people,
end users being the companies
operators
that are in the collaboration.
So by end users, I mean we've got the 5 collaborators within RAICo, and within each of those collaborators, there'll be end users working on, for example, the Sellafield site or UKAA who actually own the problem.
Right.
They're the people who, they turn up for work and they go, I wish I had something which could do this. So they're the ones who really own the challenges because it's impacting them from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So we engage with those end users who are on the sites and say, what are your problems? And consider whether there could be a robotic solution. And then essentially you can think of it almost as, the Hopper model. You get all those ideas in, and then you look at them and you cross-correlate and you say, where's the commonality between those different challenges? Oh, of the 4 partners, we all generally have glove box challenges, or we might have a swabbing challenge from a health physics perspective. Okay, well, we should definitely have some projects in those areas. But then we might go, actually, on the Sellafield site, they have this one burning problem. Well, actually, that's going to have a significant impact. Therefore, that should also make it into the program. Right. So some of our projects we find within the program might have a singleton end user. Some might have 2 people who have an interest in it, and others might be applicable to all the different members. And that's how we start to down select the projects, is trying to find that balance matched against need, impact, duration, urgency, whether we have internal capabilities, whether we need external capabilities, whether we have existing hardware. So we have to do that cross correlation, and that's what we call the RAICo annual plan.
Okay.
And we're just in the midst of building that at the moment.
For the year ahead, then.
For the year ahead, yeah. And that then gets signed off by all the collaborators. We have a management team that it's signed off at with representatives from all the 5 collaborators. And then it goes to the RAICo steering board, and then they sign off against that as well. And that's then used as our template moving forwards.
And who makes up the team? Is it students? Is it postgrads? Is it employees of those companies?
Yeah, so within, so if you think about RAICo as a whole, it involves representation from across them all, and that might be project managers, senior managers, it might be operators, it might be so the end users, or it might be we have engineers, technicians. So it's a whole mix of different people depending upon the skill sets which are required.
So it's primarily employees then, rather than students or like from the university?
Yeah, so at the university it will be PhD students, lecturers, postdocs.
Okay.
As well from the University of Manchester.
And they all work together, like you bring them together as a mixed team, do you?
Sometimes. So on some of the projects it might be University of Manchester and UKAA working together. Sometimes it'll be those separately. Sometimes it'll be we have a project and that end user might sit within Sellafield working with UKAA engineers. It might be AWE again, or the problem holders working alongside the University of Manchester. So you match up essentially where the skill sets are required across the programme, depending upon what that particular project needs.
That sounds really exciting and really, really interesting, bringing different people with different skills together like that. And I guess because it's sort of research and development, R&D, that whole kind of like almost experimental little bit kind of area of work, that early stage technology readiness level, does it mean that you don't really know for sure that you're going to find a solution to the problem at the end, or that it's going to work?
Yeah, so you'll develop your project with your end goal, and then you'll have a number of discrete go no go points throughout there to show that. So you wouldn't necessarily commit your whole lot of funding in one particular project. You'd say we need to get to this point to prove this bit. Then we'll do the next bit. Does that prove it? Yes, carry on funding it. Does that prove it? Until you get to the end. So lots of these have stop, no-go decision points in terms of, do we continue beyond this? So you might prove a little bit at the start. Can we build that component? Well, if you can't build that component, you can't build the rest of it. So at that point, the project would get stopped.
I see.
So standard project management, as you might do across any other project, but this is a robotics related rather than being in another area.
And there's a really important regional element here, isn't there? If you look at what we're trying to achieve as a region in Cumbria, and I believe, what you're trying to achieve as a region in Oxfordshire, and there's that important kind of collaboration across that piece. So there's obviously the project called Acorn that is part of this picture. Could you tell us a bit about that? Yeah,
so if we think about the collaborators, first of all, that make up RAICo, we have Sellafield, which is in the northwest, and Cumbria, we have Manchester in the middle, and then we have UKAA, which is based out of Oxfordshire, and then AWE, which is essentially just south. And so we think about it within RAICo in terms of twinning. So we're twinning Whitehaven almost with Culham, so Cumbria with Oxfordshire. But when we recognise that twinning, it's, I guess, in the form of both areas share nuclear decommissioning challenges. So we have Sellafield from Cumbria, and then within Oxfordshire, we have JET, which is the Joint European Taurus, on the Culham site for UKAA, which has entered decommissioning and repurposing, but we also have Hartwell.
Right.
And then if you think from a socio-economic perspective, we talk about the haves and the have-nots. So we have some pockets and areas within Cumbria and Oxfordshire where people are quite well paid, and then we have areas of social deprivation. So there's areas within Cumbria that we're all familiar with, but there's also Blackbird Leys, Rose Hill, Barton, for example, and Oxfordshire, where we see similar demographics.
Interesting.
So we have that within RAICo, but Acorn is really specifically focusing on those two regions, and it's the accelerator for Cumbria and Oxfordshire for robotics in nuclear, which is funded via EPSRC, Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, which lots of acronyms here, which are part of UK research and innovation. And that's very much primarily targeted at probably a bit earlier in the technology readiness levels than RAICo, which is around fundamental R&D. And it's what's called a place-based impact acceleration account. And that's all about how do you catalyse innovation in areas. So it's very strong link to place. And we try to make this argument that actually, you know, Oxfordshire and Cumbria, you might think they're not linked, but for all the reasons that we've just discussed, they are actually linked. So how can we take the best from both areas and combine it and learn from it, but then also ensure that we're not duplicating across the two regions and actually sharing? And whilst there is a strong element focused on R&D and translation, there's also strongly focused on collaboration. So how do we bring people together? And then also culture. So how do we work with people from either disadvantaged backgrounds or underrepresented backgrounds in order to bring them together and make them aware of the opportunities within robotics, which I guess aligns really well with your background, doesn't it?
iSH is all about economic inclusive growth, and we're all about helping to build those skills, build the capabilities, encourage some of the people who are perhaps not in work or haven't been educated to be able to start getting into that education pathway, develop those skills, start to get into jobs. And, you know, some of these jobs are fantastic for people that could just be more hands-on perhaps rather than go down the academic route. You know, there's so many different options here. And I think it's about, you know, addressing those pockets of deprivation and finding those people and bringing them into this workplace where they can see an exciting future for themselves.
And robotics should really be one of those areas where, you know, you talked before about students, PhD students, postdocs, but a robotics operator just needs to have really good hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, this comes back to the piece around it resonating with kids in schools, is that, I mean, there must be loads of kids out there who are brilliant with their Xbox control. You know, Xbox control. Very similar, you pick up a Steam Deck, or it's very similar in terms of the controls that you need to use.
Right.
So robotics, you know, we talk about it being available to everybody from those who are, you know, more hands-on up to PhD level and beyond. But I think that comes back to the well part, you know, why do we bother going to work? And for me, it's making sure that when we eventually get to retire, and who knows what age that will be, you can look back in your career and say, oh, I made a bit of a difference, that I actually did something that delivered impact, which made a difference to somebody somewhere. And that might be in terms of, we saved taxpayers' money, or it might be, you know what, that kid from that school in a part of West Cumbria who didn't know that robotics existed, they're now a robotics engineer or an operator or a technician, or they've found a career pathway, they've been inspired by something that you've been involved with. And I think when you get that stage in your career when, you know, you can't be driven purely by money and by artifacts around you, you've got to really think about why is it you go to work and what drives you to get out of bed in the morning. And I guess you must see that in iSH, right? As a kind of a delivering socio-economic impact locally. I mean, we're sat in Cleaton today, which is the whole reason that iSH was developed, right? To deliver that value here. You must feel quite proud around iSH and what it's starting to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely right. My purpose for shifting from the commercial world into economic development is because I wanted to have that sense of I'm getting out of bed every day to do something that's going to be meaningful and give something back and help society in some way. And that's probably something that was kind of inspired through my work with women in nuclear again. Because when you start to deliver something that you see the outcomes of it and what it means to individual people, that's when you feel I'm making a difference. I'm doing something that's adding value to this world. And seeing or hearing stories from people about how that particular initiative impacted their lives or personally helped them move up the ladder or get a job or, visit a place they'd never been to before and never would have had the opportunity to. That's when you start to feel, oh, this is why I'm here. This is making everything sort of worthwhile. So I definitely kind of made that choice to move into that economic development space for that reason. I think that it is a really hard space to be in because it takes a long time. You know, it really is a marathon and not a sprint. And trying to help a whole region to improve its economic position is really tricky, and it does take a long time, because you can't, as a small organization with a little bit of funding but not a lot, help individual companies. You've got to go kind of do things that are beneficial to the collective, but that takes time. The promotion of the region as a whole, of the capability of the region as a whole, or the skills, offering skills courses, or like the sprints that we run together, RAICo and iSH, for example. We can talk about those in a minute. It's a step. Each one is a little stepping stone, but it takes a long time. It will take years for iSH to see the results and the outcomes of what it sets out to achieve. And I don't know, maybe RAICo is the same. It takes years to kind of get to the point at which your project's delivered and you can actually show the success of what you've set out to do, and you start to see the benefits of the robot doing what it's meant to be doing. These things take time, but yeah, for me, it's the driver. It's worth it.
Yeah, well, but benefits are super important, but quantifying them can sometimes be difficult, particularly from a socioeconomic perspective. So
Absolutely.
Qualitative and quantitative benefits, capturing them and being able to explain to your stakeholders.
Yeah.
And stakeholders of a wide variety, right?
Yeah.
So for yourself, I guess it's from your council to the companies you're representing in your clusters to the
Our
local
funders.
communities, your funders,
absolutely,
and the
everyone.
language that you use and how you use it is different depending upon your stakeholders, and your different stakeholders want different things, which is no different really to within RAICo in terms of making sure we give the messaging in the appropriate way to our different collaborators for their needs internally as well, to demonstrate the value that RAICo is delivering and to ensure onward funding.
And what drives you? What drives Kirsty Hewitson? What makes you tick, and why did you choose to go into RAICo? What was your background? Where were you coming from?
Yeah, so I guess my background's always been in technology translation and innovation. I'm actually a chemist by training, and started out in chemistry, small molecule drug discovery, with a spin out from Oxford Uni, focusing on something called ischemic disease. So when you go to low oxygen concentrations, how do you overcome that as certain physiological effects on the body?
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Goodness.
Yeah. And it's how I develop a pill to overcome that. At the moment, we use something called EPO, erythropoietin, which is an injectable that you'll probably have heard about from a drug street perspective. But I was really super fortunate to be working on that project within the university, which ended up being spun out into a company. And the prof who's working on it has since won the Nobel Prize for Physiology.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I mean, I've never worked on a project like that since, but yeah, but it's all serendipity, right? It's all luck to a certain extent. So from there, I went into a spin-out company focused around that small molecule, and we partnered with Amgen, who were the largest biotech in the world at the time. But that really taught me about how do you take an academic project and how do you translate it to something which might be commercially valuable and therapeutically useful. And after Amgen, they moved it on into preclinical studies. We then received some funding to instead start look at trying to find similar projects in different areas from around Europe. So I did a lot of university engagement across Europe, trying to find these projects in lots of different therapeutic areas, from infectious disease to oncology to cardiovascular, and how do you translate them to a key inflection point and then commercialize them onto industry, which really randomly, through a bit of a slightly convoluted journey, I ended up in Helsinki. Setting up the tech transfer office for the University of Helsinki as their director of life sciences.
Oh, wow.
So focus not just on small molecule therapeutics, but diagnostics and medical devices, working with the academics, creating spin-out companies and licensing opportunities. And I did that for about 3.5 years. So I used to spend a week in the UK, week in Helsinki, till eventually got to that point of, really can't be doing all this commuting, and ended up working for Plowshare Innovations, which does some of the tech transfer commercialization for the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory at Porton Down.
Okay.
So that was how do you take those military applications and either put them into the civilian sector or push them forward to commercialization. And through that tech transfer piece, I was then introduced to the National Nuclear Laboratory and ended up moving there to head up their innovation program and then lead on their strategy before going from that strategy piece into Innovate UK Knowledge Transfer Network, which is now Innovate UK Business Connect. So I was the chief exec there for a while, and from there moved then into the robotics piece. So pretty much technology agnostic, don't really mind. You ask the same questions all the time. What's the need? What's the approach? What are the benefits? What's the competition? How long will it take? How much will it cost? What intellectual property do we have? Whether it's robotics or life sciences or defense, you should always be asking these same sort of questions. So I guess, when I think about, when my career comes to an end, I think you just want to look back and hope that you've done something useful, which has really added some benefit, whether it's scientific or economic or societal, something where you can go, yeah, I'm proud of that. I've done something that's actually made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. What do you do outside of work? Do you have time outside of work?
Oh, I run. I do a lot of running. Yeah, I like being on. Right. So that's one of the reasons for being in the Lake District. So I just love being out in the mountains, being on the hills. Yeah, just that sense of freedom. You can switch off from work. You just concentrate on your feet. Navigating your way around, taking in the views, and you can just completely switch off. And if people say, "Oh, what do you do when you're out on the hills for all those hours?" And I just don't really think about anything. You're just thinking about being on the fell and, where your feet are going at that moment in time. So, yeah, I love being out in the mountains.
And do you run on your own, or do you take part in big competitions and challenges?
A mixture. But I do a lot of running with my dog, Trifan. Okay. Call out to Trifan, named after a Welsh mountain. Absolutely love her. Cool. Yeah, so I do most of my running with her. But then I've also got a lot of... That made me sound quite lonely, didn't it? But I do actually have some friends. I do have some friends as well. Yeah. And we do everything from, we'll enter competitions together, or you'll be supporting different people on events and helping them through the mountains. So, yeah, a whole mixture of things from, running locally to normally head off to the Alps at least once a year to go running the mountains over the summer.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What's next for RAICo? Where do you want to take it? And can you tell us a bit about what you do internationally? Because that's quite exciting too.
Yeah, so I guess internationally we do that through, not through RAICO, because RAICO is very much UK based. Right. So RAICO is used as an exemplar to, say, other countries. To UK AAA, we have strong connections into Japan. So there's a program called Long Ops, long-term operations using long-reach manipulators, which was jointly funded by UKRI, NDA and TEPCO, which is a Tokyo Electric Power Company, responsible for Fukushima Daiichi. And that was a program looking at robotic solutions across use cases, which included Fukushima, JET, and Sellafield. And as a consequence of that, we've just really stayed in touch with them. So they are very much TEPCO taking on the decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi, and they're thoroughly leading on that. But they're building up their robotics capability. So we essentially work almost as that trusted friend with them in order to guide them in some of their robotics deployments. And then FRA, Fukushima Institute for Research, Education and Innovation, who you'll be very familiar with because you also do work with them. Again, they've recently been set up, I think 2 years ago it was now. And that was very much around that revitalization, regeneration of the Fukushima area. And one of their key R&D strands is robotics. Okay. So once again, it's very much around knowledge transfer, learning, being seen as a trusted nation. So they'd like to know, well, if we do R&D in nuclear decommissioning, what are the things we need to think about? What happens when you take a robot into an area of high radiation? What do we need to think about? How do you remove people from harm? So again, more in terms of a bit of being that trusted friend that the people they can ask questions to as a government entity.
So RAICo, what does the future hold? Where do you see it going?
So I guess, and on one hand, it's very much more of the same. So we've had some foundational years, which has been how do you actually get 5 organisations to work together? How do you start to identify those common challenges? And then how do you move the projects through your pipeline to the point where you push towards deployments? But ultimately, when we think about RAICo, the stage at which projects emerge are probably around TRL 6. Yeah. So then it's how do we now engage with those end users to get them onto site? So you have, for example, the Remote Technologies Group at Sellafield who do a fabulous job in terms of actually getting the kit onto site. So how do we ensure we have that baton handover with them to move on to deployments? Because they're completely leading deployments at Sellafield. But let's not forget supply chain.
I was going to say, how can supply chain get involved?
Supply chain for us, that key route, that key avenue for how do we get technology onto sites and how do we commercialize it. So again, I'll come back to, you know, we talk about some of the kit and some of the tools that we might develop with the hardware. We're not a production manufacturing organization. So at that point, we'd be looking for supply chain to actually, again, pick up the baton and go, actually, yeah, you've demonstrated there's an end use case. We can see there's a market. Therefore, actually, we'd now like to pick that technology up and, you know, develop it to the point where it's CE marked, where it's readily available, and where it can be more widely deployed. And that for us is that engagement with supply chain is absolutely integral to RAICo's future success. And we've got a good host of companies in West Cumbria to do that.
We do.
You know, Forth, Core Nuclear Solutions, Createch again, you know, all very well placed to support in that endeavour.
Absolutely. That was really fascinating. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us today and look forward to seeing what else RAICo comes up with going forward.
Great. Thanks for having me.